This is Kayla. She is physically more mature than students her own age. She excels in sports, visual arts, likes maths and science, but has trouble keeping up with class content. Students notice she has been very withdrawn. Other staff members have noticed she's been missing an awful lot of class. You hope that everything is okay. You've noticed she's having trouble with students her own age and think she's been hanging around older students who have been reprimanded for doing drugs in the past. And you hope that they're not following down the same path. You know she has a supportive family, but English is the second language in her home, and they are from a low socioeconomic family. You know she wants to go to university and do arts and hopes to do well in school. Maybe there's something you can do to help.
We all know that human beings are social and require interaction in order to mature appropriately. Arnett states the most important basis for friendships in adolescence is similarity. As we have all known, Kayla is biologically more mature than her peers. She is finding it difficult to relate to them.
As I said earlier, she wants to do well in school, but these older students are bad influences who have been reprimanded for the use of illicit drugs.
Maybe we can introduce effective teaching strategies in our classroom to help her improve socially with her fellow peers. Perhaps we could all use cooperative learning.
You have to remind me, what's cooperative learning again?
So cooperative learning is defined as small groups of students working together on a common task.
Right, I remember now.
I remember reading something about this in Cooperation and Competition Theory and Research. From what I remember, there are 5 elements that allow successful cooperation. From memory, these include positive interdependence, face-to-face interaction, individual and group accountability, group behaviours, and group processing.
Right, it provides students with responsibility, accountability, and social skills to help them achieve the learning goals provided by one of us.
This may be just what we need for Kayla to have healthier relationships with her peers, and not with the older students she has been seeing with.
Exactly. Cooperative learning will allow Kayla to work with her fellow peers rather than receive instructional advice from a teacher.
This will help promote other students to build healthy relationships with each other and help Kayla discover similarities with her peers, which will in turn help her do well in school.
Aren't there limitations to this approach though?
There is a chance that Kayla will not be willing to work with her peers and not participate. As well as this, she may find that she struggles to find any similarities with them, which will lead her down the wrong path with the older students.
In addition to that, she may not have the skills required for cooperative learning. She may find she's socially different from the other students and may not have the ability to work with them effectively.
So, what you're both saying is that cooperative learning is an effective teaching strategy to use to help students with their social development, but teachers need to provide instruction and guidance for the strategy to work effectively?
Correct.
Well, what else could we look at?
We could look at Piaget's theory. His observations convinced him that children think differently at different ages and that changes in cognitive development proceed in distinct stages.
Well, the idea of the stages means that each person's cognitive abilities are organised into a coherent mental structure. From memory, Piaget focused on how cognition changes with age, and the driving force behind this was maturation.
This could be another reason why Kayla has moved beyond her peers to older peers, more mature peers than the ones in her class.
Yes, it could very well be. Piaget characterised maturation as an active process where children seek out information and stimulation in the environment that matches maturity of their thinking. This could be exactly what Kayla is unknowingly doing.
So, if we follow along with Piaget's stages, she would be in the formal operational stage of adolescence, which means she should be able to get the correct answer for any question we have asked her, and also explain that answer.
Right. From memory, it is called hypothetical deductive reasoning, but the only way for Kayla to develop this type of thinking would be if we all gave her clear and coherent instruction.
This must be why Kayla is having trouble keeping up with the rest of her classes. She doesn't understand the instructions.
This is true, but what if we looked at information processing approach instead?
What? You mean looking at the cognitive development as continuous?
Well, yeah, we all know that information processing begins with information entering the senses, and the information that is processed is what has your attention.
Paying attention to something and processing the information wouldn't do you much good without the use of one's memory and being able to use what you remember.
We might be able to use what we know about information processing and memory to help as a teaching strategy so Kayla does understand the content and also keeping up with the rest of the class.
Right, so we have short-term memory, which is the information currently the focus of your attention. This, however, has very limited space.
Then there is long-term memory, where the information received is committed to the long-term storage so you can use that information later when attention isn't focused on it.
We might be better off devising a strategy that relates to working memory. It is known as mental workbench, the place where you store the information while you're working on it.
Okay, what do you suggest?
I recently read something written by George Miller, The Magic Number 7 plus or minus 2, Some Limits on Our Capacity of Processing Information. He believes that one way to process the information being received is to shrink the amount of information. He suggests that chunking strategies can help improve how much the student retains. The larger the amount, the more they have to memorise, the harder it is to remember.
So the smaller the amount of information, then the easier it is to memorise and remember?
Exactly. This could help Kayla remember the class content and keep up with her work.
Yeah, that could work, but what about the students that aren't having trouble with their content? This strategy may not necessarily work for all students.
That's true. There has to be something else we could try.
Yeah, there is. So we know that Kayla is biologically more mature than her peers, and studies have shown that early onset puberty creates a higher risk for problems.
Yeah, there is a higher risk of getting depression, substance abuse, delinquency, and school problems.
Exactly, and Kayla is what we would consider an at-risk student. A study I read recently by David Hill and John Brown suggests that at-risk students may benefit from a classroom-based behaviour support program.
Okay, what would that involve?
Okay, so this system is centred around the students' individual goal setting. They can self-manage themselves while also assisting teachers in creating a learning environment that is successful and engaging for all the students.
But in order for this to be successful, doesn't there need to be a balance between the student's individual support and the support that the teacher receives in the classroom?
Yes, as well as emphasising the importance of cooperation between the student and the teacher.
So how would we go about implementing this strategy?
Well, in this situation, students will be required to rate how they think they have achieved the goals they set for themselves on a daily basis, and they rate themselves on a scale from 1 to 5.
Okay.
So, a rating of 1 to 2 suggests that the student doesn't believe that they achieved their goals. A 3 suggests that they achieved them, and a 4 to 5 suggests that the student believes they went above and beyond the goals they set for themselves.
So by creating a situation where the student evaluates themselves rather than one of us telling them whether or not we think that the student acted appropriately.
So basically reversing the role of responsibility.
Yes and no. In this situation, it's up to the student to take responsibility for their actions and the resulting successes or failures they have.
Interesting. How would we use this strategy in regards to Kayla?
Well, it would allow Kayla to develop a sense of self-discipline, self-awareness, and it also creates a communication pathway between Kayla and her teachers.
Wouldn't this strategy also have limitations?
Yeah, Kayla would need to take the program seriously, and we as teachers would need to be supportive of it. If Kayla chooses not to engage in this program, it is likely to have little effect in changing her attitudes and behaviours when it comes to school.
Why do you want to teach? I didn't know I wanted to teach until I started studying music at TAFE and realised that there were other ways of teaching students effectively. I had this teacher named Kelly. She was the drummer of the South Sydney Rabbitohs marching band, and she taught with this enthusiasm and passion that I'd never seen a teacher teach before. And it inspired me to want to pass on my passion and enthusiasm for music to other students like she had with me. How do you teach? In the past, when I've tutored and taught guitar lessons, I felt I had to be patient with my students when they didn't understand the content. If the students didn't understand at all, I chose a different approach of turning the information I was teaching them and making it a smaller amount of information. At the time, I didn't know what it was until I read Sensory Short-Term and Working Memory by Bronning, Schroer and Norby, and read George Miller's example of for capacity for processing information and using chunking to teach students. I didn't realise, but that's what I was doing. And why do I teach that way? I guess I chose to teach that way because when I looked back at my own school career, having the chunking idea in place helped me understand the content better, because as a student I had trouble learning the content my peers seemed to understand. This was specifically evident when it came to subjects such as maths and science, subjects where I had to do a lot of reading and thinking, but when it came to subjects like art and music and food tech and things like that, where I was doing things, I seemed to be better at them.
The most rewarding moment when teaching is working with a student who may be struggling with a particular concept, and that moment when you see both your work and effort as well as that of the students come together as they reach that point of grasping and understanding what you've been trying to teach. As I've studied this unit, what's really struck a chord with me was learning how students process what they're learning in class, and how it's really important for teachers to think about how they present the information. Studies show that humans have a limited processing capacity when learning new information. Miller discovered that working memory is limited to holding anywhere from 5 to 9 different pieces of information, while Cowan discovered that we are only capable of processing 2 to 4 of these new informational elements when converting from short-term to long-term memory. However, it is possible for teachers to stretch their students' learning abilities by using strategies such as chunking, that is, organising the information into relatable groups. When teaching a unit, it is important to scaffold the students as their learning progresses. This relates to Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, where teachers are required to bridge the gap between what a student already knows and what they are capable of learning. When doing this in a classroom, I would begin the unit with finding out what students already know, so as to help prevent an advanced learner situation from occurring. These situations arise when you show students how to solve more basic concepts that they already know the answers to, and could create a cognitive overload for the learner. By combining the strategies I have learnt throughout this unit, I hope to create a positive learning environment in my classroom where students can learn to the best of their ability.
The reason why I want to teach is because I want to pass on knowledge and enthusiasm onto every student. I believe I can achieve this through making the content as engaging as possible for my students. What really stuck out for me most this semester was week 3, when we studied cognitive functions and development, and how adolescents and emerging adults think and solve problems. This unit has taught me that the frontal lobe is involved with most of the higher functions of the brain, such as planning ahead and problem solving. When processing information, adolescents use their sense of memory: touch, smell, taste, visual, and sound. They use their short-term memory, which Miller states is limited to holding between 5 to 9 elements of information, and long-term memory, which Cohen states is limited to processing 2 to 4 elements of information. And lastly, schemas, which are structures for organizing and interpreting information through words and concepts. I must consider this information when teaching my students to prevent cognitive overload. Pettaway and Clark state that according to Vygotsky, if children and adolescents encounter ideas that do not fit into their existing schemas, then there is an imbalance and they need assistance from an adult. To help my students understand the content, I would use Vygotsky's theory of the zone of proximal development, which is the gap between what adolescents know and what they are capable of doing, if guided by an adult, or more capable peer. And his theory of scaffolding, which refers to the degree of assistance provided to the adolescents in the zone of proximal development. As an English teacher, I could use this when studying novels. I would scaffold the novel by giving students a detailed outline of the novel and get them to write this in their book so that they can use this when they organise the novel as they read.